And now for more on the Samsung Electronics Labor Union's planned strike and the domestic economy, we're joined today by Dr. Kim Min-kyun, professor at Sogang Business School. Professor Kim, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me today.
So Samsung Electronics Labor Union has been protesting a widening pay gap with its rival SK hynix, and after the two sides failed to reach a deal last night, it says it plans to call a massive strike on May 21st. That's about a week. So could this disrupt global semiconductor supply chains or affect investment sentiment?
Of course, Samsung Electronics is play a very important role in the semiconductor industry, in basically the global industry. But indeed, when nobody wants to go for the strike, right? The government is going to go get into it, and they're trying to draw some agreement. And of course, the top management of Samsung Electronics, of course, they don't want to have some strike in this current trend. Remember, right now, the semiconductor, especially for the Samsung Electronics, including the SK hynix, well, they're doing very good in the semiconductor industry. Basically, they're trying to generate more products, and they make a huge profits. But now, because of the sharing those kinds of incentives, well, the labor union trying to go for a strike. But if they go for strike, basically, I think like we have a lot of concern that this kind of good trend will go down, and it's going to make an impact for the Korea economy as well as our semiconductor industry. So, well, I hope that it's they're gonna go for the reach to the agreement, but well, who knows? But no one doesn't want to go for the strike right now for the Samsung Electronics.
Right, and this comes as Korean stocks continue to rally with the KOSPI now nearing 8,000. Some analysts say it could reach 12,000 by the end of the year. What's your take on these forecasts?
Well, it's kind of very optimistic forecasting, basically, for my opinion, but I think it's kind of feasible. But if you look at those kind of KOSPI trend for current year, well, I think those kind of over more than 12,000, well, I think it's reachable goal. But if you look at the main players, like we mentioned about the Samsung Electronics, but the semiconductor industry, including the SK hynix, but they are the one who trying to boost up those kind of KOSPI, well, because they have generated so much profits as well as revenue. Therefore, well, I think, well, those kind of forecasting or prediction is kind of a good sign for our Korean economy. But as you look at those kind of current situation like the war in Iran and US, and we concern about those kind of price for the oil, and we talk about those kind of union strike for the Samsung Electronics. But even though there are many various events that we are facing with, but I think we kind of in the stance for the optimistic in our KOSPI and of course our Korea economy based on those kind of semiconductors, like a nice forecasting for the future.
Right, and the Korean government appears to be pretty determined to fight inflation, with the Blue House saying this week it's entering what they call war on rising prices. So what do you make of the government's response so far, and how serious exactly is the current economic situation here in South Korea?
Well, their stance on they're trying to expand their fiscal policy, but one of the concerns that I have is, of course, the price of the oil. But if you the war between the Iran and US is going to go for the more for the long term, like the war between the Russia and Ukraine. Well, I think it's going to make a huge impact especially for the inflation rate. But if you look at the oil price, but before the war, the oil price was kind of like $65, but now it's over $100. Well, if you look at all those kind of naphtha and all the chemicals and all the materials, and of course, the Korea has a lot of dependence on importing the oil from the Middle East. But if oil price is going up, of course, it's going to make an impact for the whole economy, especially for the price, and it's going to make an impact on the inflation. So if inflation is going to get higher, and of course, with the buying powers, all the economy is kind of get the pressures for those kind of issues, then it's going to slow down our growth for our economic situation. So, of course, the government is trying to intervene and they're trying to control those kind of inflation. But right now, the basic solution, of course, the war has to be end in the Middle East.
Right, and analysts say this current economic situation is making it very difficult for the Bank of Korea to move toward rate cuts. And some even say the bank could even raise key interest rates in the second half of the year. What are your thoughts on the central bank's policy direction going forward?
Well, now they're just looking at our economic situation, but they're kind of in the conflict situation. Well, inflation is they're gonna get the pressure for the inflation, of course, so that they trying to have some prediction for increasing their interest rate. But if we're going to increase our interest rate, of course, then we talk about the debt from the household. We have a lot of issues for like a house, I mean the real estate and other issues, of course. So well, they have to be very careful on increasing those kind of interest rate, even though we already know, we already recognize those kind of like the oil prices going up, inflation rate. So I think well, they're trying to in the considering the watching those kind of economic situation, and maybe the next quarter or maybe at the end of the year, maybe they have some forward step to increase their interest rate. But right now, they have to wait and see how this is economy going, corresponding to the oil price.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Kim, thank you so much for your time and insight today. We appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for having me.